Phillies have the best record in the major leagues at 58-32. The Angels lost at home Monday night to the Texas Rangers. Former Clipper star Paul George will wear number 8 when he suits up for the Philadelphia 76ers. George chose number 8 to honor Kobe Bryant. George is unable to wear his normal number 13 jersey. That number, worn by Hall of Famer Wilt Chamberlain, was retired by the Philadelphia franchise in 1991. Chamberlain played 7 of his 19 NBA seasons with Philadelphia. The LA Sparks are at home tonight against Minnesota. The Sparks have only one win since June 9th. Chicago Sky forward Angel Reese set a WNBA record with 13 consecutive double-doubles. She broke the record held by former Sparks star Candace Parker. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the fastest growing talk radio station in Southern California. Home to 50,000 watts and an audience reach of 12 million listeners. KBLA Talk 1580 is a pioneer for black audio content, including our groundbreaking $2 million climate justice campaign and the most loyal, influential audience. According to an independent research study by the polling firm Aviterus, for the second consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 is the most trustworthy, reliable, and credible news source for black audiences and beyond in Southern California. Let KBLA Talk 1580 power your advertising dollars. Our omni-channel custom marketing solutions are specifically tailored to connect with your ideal target audience. We leverage audio, podcasts, streaming, digital, social media, and local activations to get your message out to the black community. Get in touch with our advertising team today at advertising@KBLA1580.com. That's advertising@KBLA1580.com. KBLA 1580. We've got your black.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavisSmileyShow.com. That's thetavisSmileyShow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this live program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, what impact does the recent Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity have on national security? How are the Justice Department and Homeland Security processing the High Court's decision? Does the decision portend more political violence this year? We will talk about it all with former D.C. Homeland Security Chief Dr. Donnell Harvin in our second hour. In our third hour, 2 conversations. Up first,
funniest person in the Wayans family is my mama. People that lost your mama, we are a part of an elite gang, the Dead Mama Gang. Gang, gang! I said, Mama, you made 5 millionaires and you only made 1 crackhead. I said, woman, your crackhead to millionaire ratio is unparalleled for a black woman in America.
Yeah, I'm laughing already. Comedian, actor, screenwriter, and producer Marlon Wayans on his new comedy special, Good Grief, And believe it or not, his comedy classic, White Chicks, is now 20 years old. Hard to believe. Marlon Wayans on the top side today of Hour 3. On the B side of Hour 3, a dialogue with the founder of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, Dorsey Nunn. Mr. Nunn also has a new book out called What Kind of Bird Can't Fly, a memoir of resilience and resurrection with a foreword by Michelle Alexander, author of the classic text, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. So we'll talk with Dorsey Nunn, the founder of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, on the B side of Hour 3 after Marlon Wayans. In this first hour today, now that it's over, thank God for Jesus, UCLA law professor Rick Hasen on the Supreme Court's most recent term and a conversation about his new text, A Real Right to Vote, How a Constitutional Amendment Can Safeguard American Democracy. Professor Hasen, good to have you on this program. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
If I complained, I'd be an ingrate. I'm doing well, and good to be in dialogue with you. Let me start with a couple of broad questions that will narrow our way as we move through this hour and get more specific, I suspect. But broadly speaking, what have you made of, what are you making of, how are you processing this most recent Supreme Court term?
Well, I focused especially on democracy issues, and the term has been a disappointment. There were the two big Trump cases, one involving whether or not he could be removed from the ballot. You may remember that Colorado was going to remove him from the ballot because he was found to be disqualified from serving for having participated in insurrection. The Supreme Court fast-tracked that case and said that states didn't have the power to do this under the Constitution, which is an unusual reading of the 14th Amendment, because usually states do have the power to enforce that. And then the court slow-walked the immunity case. The immunity case, of course, really matters because it's holding up the election subversion trial that should have taken place back in March to deal with what Donald Trump has been accused of doing in relation to trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And now it looks impossible for there to be a trial on those issues before the election, so voters won't get a chance to know what a jury thinks about the very serious charges that have been brought against him.
We'll work through a number of democracy issues in this hour, I am certain. But to the immunity case, which, as you mentioned, is holding up the election subversion trial, not going to happen, the latter, between now and November. No question about that, it seems. What was your read? Everybody has one. I haven't asked you your take on it, so I'll ask you now. What was your read on the immunity ruling?
Well, it was kind of a maximalist presidential power decision that protects Donald Trump. The court went much further than it needed to in the case. It set up a number of roadblocks that prevent even the introduction of evidence of anything related to an official act of the president to prove his motive. So to make that more specific, he could be charged eventually with this fake elector scheme, trying to get states to send in fake slates of electors. And if that can go forward, and that's a big if, because of the way the court decided what gets immunity, even if that goes forward, any information that he may have shared with the Justice Department, he had someone at the Justice Department named Jeffrey Clark who he was communicating with and who he was allegedly conspiring with to try to put out false information that the Georgia election was full of fraud and irregularities. That information can't even be introduced as evidence because it touches on something that's official, which is a president's conversation with the Justice Department. And so it really went out of its way, so far so that even Amy Coney Barrett, one of the conservatives on the court, said this is going too far in terms of what evidence could be introduced. It's a huge gift to Donald Trump. And, of course, the biggest gift of all was the delay, because if Donald Trump wins the election, and he's now the favorite to win the election, he will simply have the Justice Department abandon this case, and that will be the end of it.
There is a lot of talk these days about democracy, certainly inside the Democratic Party. We had a couple of spirited conversations about that yesterday, but I am looking forward to this hour in conversation with Professor Rick Hasen, UCLA, talking about this notion of safeguarding democracy vis-a-vis the elections this November. Obviously, connected to the rulings of the Supreme Court in this most recent term. But again, this issue of democracy is in fact on the ballot. A number of folk have been passing around. You may have seen it already or heard it. Our dear friend and brother Otis Moss III, who's the pastor of Trinity Church in Chicago, did a piece the other day that has been seen, I think, millions of times already. And he had his own unique take about what it means that democracy is on the ballot. I may play a bit of that when we come forward, if you haven't heard Otis Moss III's take on this, and then we'll get Professor Hassan to comment on that as well. But again, in this hour, let's unpack this notion of what it means in this particular moment, given all the drama inside the Democratic Party. We'll get to some of that. Given the existential threat that Donald Trump clearly represents to the Republic, we'll get to that, and all the other issues right now that are just on fire around this notion of what it means to protect and safeguard a democracy that I believe is quite fragile. We'll talk about that and more with Rick Hassan when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
Help prevent gun violence tragedies. Gun violence restraining orders can help to prevent individuals at risk of harming themselves or others by removing their guns for 21 days up to 5 years. Learn more about how to petition for a GVRO and the role of GVROs in safeguarding communities by visiting lacountygvro.org or by calling 1-833-540-0473. GVROs can save lives.
Have you been a victim of discrimination at a private business, by a landlord while seeking housing, by an employer, or by an academic institution? If so, the LA Civil Rights Department may be able to help. Please contact us at CRE@lacity.org or call 213-978-1845. Again, 213-978-1845 or visit laisforeveryone.com.
Paid for by government. Did you hear? A secret hoard of 1904 $20 gold Liberty coins have been found. These gorgeous 1904p gold coins are as bright and shiny as the day they were struck, and less than 500 of these gold coins are available. Coin experts are calling this secret U.S. gold coin discovery a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you can own a piece of the hoard. When you call, you are guaranteed a 1904 gold Liberty struck at the iconic Philadelphia Mint. With limited availability, you must call now. These 1904 dated gold coins are still in uncirculated condition with brilliant luster. That is 120 years of history you can hold in your hand. To learn more, call 1-800-973-3083. Call now and you'll receive a free bonus, a $75 value free with every order. Call 1-800-973-3083 now to secure your 1904p $20 gold Liberty coins before they sell out. That's 1-800-973-3083.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
He does indeed with UCLA law professor Rick Hassan talking about his new book, A Real Right to Vote, how a constitutional amendment can safeguard American democracy. We'll get to that text as we move through this hour. Glad to have him for the hour. But we've started this conversation already, in case you just tuned in, talking about the fragility. That's my word. We'll get his take on that. The fragility of our democracy. Let me just do that right now. Before I play some of the sound from Otis Moss III, I'll explain that in just a second, in case you don't know who Otis Moss III is. Professor Hassan, what's your read on, as I termed it, the fragility of this democracy, or am I overstating it as you see it? You teach this stuff every day.
I do think that we are in a very difficult position, the most difficult position certainly in the last few generations, since the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1965. Voting rights are under threat, and now it's a different kind of threat. It's not just the threat of making it harder for people to register or to vote, although we've seen plenty of that. It's the threat of election subversion. It's the idea that there are people who are trying to manipulate election outcomes to turn election losers into election winners. We didn't really have to count. We just took for granted that people would vote. Those votes would be fairly counted. And then, we might not agree with the results, but at least whoever wins would be the person who would take office. And now that's something that we actually have to actively work to make sure that continues to happen.
So here's some sound from Otis Moss III. Otis is a friend of mine, has been on this program, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III. A dear friend of mine, like his father, Otis Moss Jr., matriculated at Morehouse in Atlanta, as did Dr. King. Otis Moss Jr. was his father. The father was a very dear friend of Dr. King. In fact, Dr. King was in the wedding of Otis Moss Jr. This is the father. The son, Otis Moss III, is the pastor of Trinity in Chicago. If that rings a bell, it's because the former pastor of Trinity was a guy named Jeremiah Wright. So Otis Moss III is the current pastor of Trinity Church on the south side of Chicago. And not unlike our friend Reverend Jamal Bryant, who you recall went viral a year or so ago during the campaign of Raphael Warnock with his treatise about what was happening in the state of Georgia. Everybody saw that Jamal Bryant clip. It went everywhere. So the same thing is happening now with this clip of Otis Moss III talking about democracy being on the ballot. The piece is about 7-8 minutes long. I'm not going to play the entire piece for you. But I want to just give you a sense of how in circles all across this country, in churches, on college campuses, in radio studios, on debate stages, this notion of democracy being on the ballot this time is real. It's one of the reasons I think Democrats are engaged in all this bedwetting now. They're so concerned about the threat that Donald Trump represents to the stability and the future of the democracy. And so all of us believe that democracy is on the ballot. I don't know ultimately if that's a winning strategy. President Biden, as you know, has trumped out that line any number of times about democracy being on the ballot. But again, in terms of the demos, in terms of everyday people, this conversation I think has caught on to some degree. And again, this clip is circulating all around the internet. Just Google Otis Moss III, democracy on the ballot, and you can find it and hear the entirety of this piece for yourself. But it fits nicely, I think, in this conversation about safeguarding American democracy that is. So here now, just a little sound of Otis Moss III with his statement, more than a statement, sort of a mini sermon, if you will, on democracy being on the ballot this year.
This past Tuesday, on Tuesday night, I was watching a debate. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way when I was watching the debate, the way some of you all just responded. But God placed something on my heart that I would like to share with everyone here and those who are online with us today. Politicians never do the right thing unless a moral witness, a prophetic wing, or an ethical enclave stand before them and demand change. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves because he felt like it, but he was forced into glory by the moral witness of the likes of Frederick Douglass. FDR did not create the New Deal because it was a good idea, but he was forced into glory by the moral witness of people who demanded action during the Great Depression. Lyndon Baines Johnson did not sign the Civil Rights Bill and the Civil Rights Act because it was a nice idea, but he was forced into glory by the work of Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, and Fannie Lou Hamer and others. Unfortunately, in our American political system, candidates and parties are beholden to special interest. But never forget, we the people have power. We the people, black people, kissed by nature's sun, have power. We have power in our vote. We have power in organizing. We have power with our pocketbook. We have power with our voice, and we have spiritual power connected to our faith. Black people have historically saved America from itself. Black people have historically been a moral witness demanding this democracy include all who yearn to breathe free. I believe the choice this November is not between two candidates, but two visions of this nation. One vision romanticizes the Confederate mythology that was birthed from the antebellum South. Another vision still sees America as the yet-to-be United States of America. I cannot support any vision You can vote for whoever you want to, but I cannot support any vision that speaks to making America great again, because my conscience and my soul tell me when a person states America with the past tense language was great, I must speak up and say, what year are you talking about? Was it before I could vote? Or was it a year I was considered nothing more as chattel? Was it a year when women did not have the right to vote? Or was it the year before unions had been organized? I cannot support anyone's false nostalgia of white supremacy. I believe democracy is on the ballot. For some, and I understand it, the only issue is the horror, tragedy, pain, and destruction of human thriving in the occupied territory we call Gaza. For others, it is Gaza, the Congo, the Sudan, and Haiti. But I say to us all, we must look at all issues, foreign and domestic. For the question before us is, what will this country be? Not for our children, not for our grandchildren, but for our great-grandchildren. We must, as a church, and when I speak of the church, I said we must, as a church, the black church collectively, not churches that just have black people in them. I'm talking about the black church of Frederick Douglass, the black church of Harriet Tubman, the black church of W.E.B. Du Bois and the souls of black folk, the black church of A. Philip Randolph, the black church of Ida B. Wells, the black church of Ella Baker, the black church of James Lawson, the black church of Willie Barrow, the black church of Jesse Jackson, the black church of Jeremiah Wright, the black church of James Cone, and the black church of Martin Luther King Jr. The question for us today, since democracy is on the ballot, is will we stand up for the 295,000 people who die as a result of poverty every year? The question for us today, since democracy is on the ballot, is will we speak for the 87 million people who are uninsured in this nation? The question for us today, since democracy is on the ballot, will we stand up for people such as members in this congregation who have to decide whether to pay their rent or purchase prescription drugs?
And you hear him tuning up now. You hear him tuning up. I can't play the entirety of the piece, but I wanted to play it long enough for you to get the frame that Otis Moss III was or is in. And you hear, as any good black preacher knows how to do, you get to that refrain. For King, it was, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. For Otis Moss III is, if democracy is on the ballot, if democracy is on the ballot, if democracy is on the ballot, you get the frame that he is in. And again, you hear him tune it up. Google it for yourself, Otis Moss III. Democracy is on the ballot. You can hear the entirety of his remarks. I shared a snippet of that because I want to tie that in to our conversation in this hour with UCLA professor Rick Hasson, who has his own ministry as a professor talking about these democratic issues. To what extent you see, sir, democracy on the ballot this year?
Well, I mean, it's certainly clear that there's a threat to democracy in the election itself, as well as, depending on who wins the election, there's the potential for authoritarian actions to be taken that could undermine the freedoms that those of us think that we enjoy under the Constitution. But, you know, I think just looking at this in a broader framework, there's some people who have a sense that we're always moving towards progress, that voting rights and democracy are always expanding. And I think right now we're in a period of contraction. The fact that someone could try to steal the election and then be the leading candidate for president in the next election tells you that for many Americans, issues of democracy are not in the forefront, and that it's going to take a lot of work. We see that go back to the beginning of our discussion, the Supreme Court is not going to be the great protector of American democracy. In fact, in my book, A Real Right to Vote, I talk about how there were really only 8 years out of the 235-year history of the Supreme Court when it really was the protector of American democracy. If there's going to be movement to strengthen And to fortify American democracy, it's going to have to come from the people. It's not going to be coming from protection from the courts.
Since you teased me, and I noticed that in your book, and I'm glad you went there because I wanted to go there anyway, tell me briefly about that 8-year period, all 200 plus years, and you argue there's really only 8 years where the Supreme Court was engaged in a robust expansion of rights. We'll come back to contraction in this present moment in a moment. But tell me about that 8-year period.
So this is in the 1960s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get I mean, think about what happened in the 1960s in terms of democracy expansion. You get a number. You get 3 constitutional amendments. 23rd Amendment giving the right to vote for president to D.C. residents. 24th Amendment giving 18 to 21-year-olds the right to vote. That's the 26th Amendment. 24th Amendment barring poll taxes. You get the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So Congress is very active. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court is active. It rejects challenges from South Carolina to the power of Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act. It then starts broadly protecting voting rights in a series of cases where Texas discriminated against military voters, and New York discriminated against voters who in school board elections who didn't have children in the school system, and the court protects people who lived on federal land in Maryland who weren't allowed to vote. It ends up creating this idea that at least for citizen adult residents and people who are not convicted of felonies, there is a fundamental right to vote, which is not in the Constitution itself. And so this was kind of reading the 14th Amendment and other parts of the Constitution more broadly to say that there is a right to vote. And if that had continued, then we probably wouldn't need to fix our Constitution, and it would have been read in a way that really is protective of the right to vote. But just fast forward to 2000, in Bush versus Gore, the case that ended the dispute over Florida's votes between Bush and Gore, right. The Supreme Court tells us we have, as Americans, no right to vote for president. It's up to state legislatures to give us that right, and the court added they can take it away at any time.
Yeah. The fascinating part for me always, when I think about this period of 8 years where, to your point, the court was more expansionist in its view about rights, is that court was basically white male. Thurgood Marshall shows up, of course, but it's basically a white male court. And now you have the most diverse court ever in this nation's history. You've got a few women on the court, a couple of African Americans on the court, got a Latina on the court. And I recognize that most of that diversity is on the left, not on the right. I'm not naive, but my point is that you had a court that was almost all white male during this era of expansion. Now you have the most diverse court ever in the nation's history, in the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever. And what we're getting is not expansion, but contraction. You ever thought about that?
Well, it's interesting points. And, I think what you have to understand is that the way the justices were picked in the 1950s and 60s, the justices who ended up being on that Warren Court, was very different. Justice Brennan, who turned out to be one of the most liberal justices in modern American history, was essentially put on the court without a hearing. It was just, and very little was known about him. Today, you know exactly what you're going to get. I am, in the big cases, I am very rarely surprised by where the conservatives line up and where the liberals line up in these cases. So the justices, it's kind of been reverse engineered, and it's not as though we're picking a random set of diverse Americans, putting them on the court and asking them what they think. They are chosen because of their ideological predispositions.
We are talking in this hour with UCLA law professor Rick Hasen about safeguarding our democracy, frankly, about the fragility of our democracy. I've got more questions. He has more answers. His book is called A Real Right to Vote, How a Constitutional Amendment Can Safeguard American Democracy. More about that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know? The United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time. Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. President Biden is getting support from the Congressional Black Caucus amid growing calls to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. Biden joined a call with black lawmakers Monday night. Some participants described Biden as clear, coherent, concise, and committed, with one calling talk of removing him from the ticket ridiculous. Most medical students at Johns Hopkins University will no longer have to pay tuition thanks to a major gift. The university announced yesterday that it's getting $1 billion from Bloomberg Philanthropies. Medical students from families making less than $300,000 a year will not pay tuition beginning this fall. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Shop Macy's Backstage today for amazing deals on everything you need for summer. Get low prices every day at Macy's Backstage. Find a store near you at macy'sbackstage.com. Off price, on trend, arriving daily.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers are back in action tonight after an off day on Monday. They're in Philadelphia for the first game of a 3-game series. The Phillies have the best record in the major leagues at 58-32. The Angels lost at home Monday night to the Texas Rangers. Former Clipper star Paul George will wear number 8 when he suits up for the Philadelphia 76ers. George chose number 8 to honor Kobe Bryant. George is unable to wear his normal number 13 jersey. That number, worn by Hall of Famer Wilt Chamberlain, was retired by the Philadelphia franchise in 1991. Chamberlain played 7 of his 19 NBA seasons with Philadelphia. The LA Sparks are at home tonight against Minnesota. The Sparks have only one win since June 9th. Chicago Sky forward Angel Reese set a WNBA record with 13 consecutive double-doubles. She broke the record held by former Sparks star Candace Parker. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.
Helping to broaden your political and moral imagination with our 2024 climate justice campaign. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Looking for a better way to get around LA? SoCal 511 gives you real-time traffic alerts to help you find faster ways around LA County. It's free and helps motorists easily find fast track and roadside assistance services. Visit SoCal511.com or dial 511 on your phone.
Hey guys, do you want male performance in the bedroom and do you want it now? Get it in 47 seconds or less. For the first time, you can have instant male enhancement. Introducing Knox 47, the topical male enhancement that works in 47 seconds or less. Satisfaction guaranteed. Finally, after years of scientific research, our proprietary formula will allow you to perform in the bedroom like never before. Just imagine that little blue pill on steroids. No reason to settle and wait when you can get instant performance now. Forget about pills and potions that make you wait hours or up to 30 days to work. That's yesterday's news. Knox 47 is brand new. The hottest thing for men. And you don't need a prescription. Call now and get your free supply for a limited time.
To find out how to get Knox 47 for free, call now. 800-617-1621. That's 800-617-1621. Free bottles for limited time. Call 800-617-1621. That's 800-617-1621.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Rick Hasson, UCLA law professor, whose new book is called A Real Right to Vote, How a Constitutional Amendment Can Safeguard American Democracy. We're talking just about that in this hour, about the state of our democracy. It's on the edge. I wish I had time today, and I suspect that Rick Hasson might not be the person to delve into this with. You'll get my point in just a second. But one of the things that's circulating, and we just heard about it in our news a little while ago, and that is this meeting that the Congressional Black Caucus had with Joe Biden this week. And I hope you're paying attention to this. Speaking of democracy being on the ballot, it was a black man named Benny Thompson who chaired the January 6th committee that brought to the fore all of the drama that happened during that insurrection when Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice are moving too slow. It was a committee chaired by a black man that helped to save this democracy by bringing again to the fore all the issues that DOJ needed to move in this case. Never mind how slow it has been, never mind that Jack Smith has been held up for the moment. It was a black man from Mississippi who chaired that committee to make that possible. I've said it many times, look at all the African Americans who are involved now in these various cases to help save this democracy from itself, as Otis Moss III said in the clip we played moments ago. You think of Letitia James in New York as the AG. You think of Fonnie Willis down in Atlanta, Georgia. You think of Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA. You think of Judge Tanya Chutkan, the African-American judge in this particular case about Donald Trump that Jack Smith has been held up in. All across the board, there are these African-Americans playing an outsized role in helping to save this democracy in real time, and that is not lost on me and ought not to be lost on you. Here comes Joe Biden this week when everybody else is telling him to stand down. Who's got his back once again? Black folk, Congressional Black Caucus. Every single time there is drama in terms of this democracy, every single time there's a bunch of there's brouhaha, put it that way, inside the Democratic Party, it's always the black folk. Always the black folk save the day. I was on the air on BET many years ago after Bill Clinton got in trouble with the Lewinsky drama. And he had not done any interviews for months. And everybody kept asking, when is the president going to sit for his first interview? Many of you know this. It made my career many, many years ago. Bill Clinton called me and asked me, offered me the first sit down after the Monica Lewinsky scandal. I wasn't naive about it. We were headed toward midterm elections. I was on BET. I was pretty good at what I did, but Bill Clinton knew that he wanted to talk to the right audience to save him in those midterm elections. They always come to the chocolate side of town to save democracy when it is up against the wall. And so here again, I just find it fascinating. We'll get to it maybe tomorrow on our program. That is the Congressional Black Caucus that's come out so boldly now in support of Joe Biden to help save his campaign, as we did in South Carolina when he ran last time. But once again, black folk are being called upon to save this democracy from itself. So maybe that's not the question for Professor Hasson at this moment. But I do think, as a scholar, and the one who teaches this stuff, there is an angle here that he might want to opine on, or I want him to opine on, and that is what you make of what I just laid out. That every time this democracy is in trouble, there is a particular set of people that are always called upon once again to save this democracy. And sadly, it's not the political right. Sadly, it's not often white males. That's just our reality, Professor Hassel.
Yeah, well, this is a little bit outside of my area, but I will say that Benny Thompson's leadership of the January 6th committee, I think, was in some ways a turning point in public recognition of what happened on January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
People were kind of in shock, and I think they, remember, we had the COVID pandemic raging, a lot of tumultuous years under Donald Trump, and people kind of tuned out of politics for a good bit of time, and didn't really focus on the violence and how close we came to having the Vice President of the United States being killed, and an attempt to use brute force to turn an election loser into an election winner. And it was Thompson's leadership, and I think really the savvy of how that committee was put together and how they packaged everything that really told a story to the American people that, at least for a time, seemed to resonate. I think we have a short attention span as a country, and we could use that reminder again, but that leadership was really exemplary.
Yep. Let me circle back to your area of expertise, and that is the Supreme Court and these constitutional issues. To my mind, and this would get me in trouble in certain circles, but I'll push forward anyway. To my mind, we are witnessing in real time a Supreme Court that is having, how might I put it, a crisis of incompetence. That's what it appears to me. Supreme Court in a crisis of incompetence. That might be overstating it, but what say you about that?
I don't think the issue is competence. I think the issue is values.
Okay.
And I think what we have is a crisis of legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And, for many years, for decades already, we've been talking about John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, as a statesman, a justice who tries to steer the court in a middle path, who doesn't want to go so far. You think about how in the Dobbs case, the abortion case, he wanted to take a somewhat less extreme position. Well, that was abandoned this year. And, I had naively thought that the Supreme Court could do a kind of compromise, a grand bargain, where they let Trump stay on the ballot in Colorado, but they let him go to trial so voters could understand what happened and see a trial with jurors deciding whether or not Donald Trump was guilty of election crimes in 2020. And yet that's not what happened. And the court, as we discussed earlier in the hour, went to an extreme. And I think in a lot of places where in the past we would expect more moderation from the court, more room for consensus on the questions of the power of the administrative state, on questions of whether or not you can have legislation that protects and regulations that protect the environment, from climate change, on women's reproductive rights, on all of these things. The court, it's not a question of competence, it's a question of ideology. And we have a far-right court, probably the most conservative court we have had since the 1930s. And it's a court that has been pulling back on voting rights, from the Shelby County case in 2013 that killed off a key part of the Voting Rights Act, to a recent case about racial gerrymandering out of South Carolina, where the court took yet another step to make it harder for black voters to get fair representation in Congress and in legislative bodies.
I am not naive, nor am I stuck on stupid, but there was a point at which I thought there was some evidence to suggest that John Roberts, the Chief Justice you mentioned a moment ago, actually cared about the integrity of this court and how it would be viewed in the years to come historically. That moment for me was around the Obamacare issue, the Affordable Care Act, when he, as you know, cast the deciding vote for that Obamacare issue to not, go up in flames, as it were. It was clear to me that he could have gone the other way, but I thought in that moment he did it because he wanted to respect and preserve whatever legitimacy the court had left for the future. And since that time, he's gone full-bore conservative as far as I'm concerned. And it appears to me that in this moment of contraction, not expansion, and America is always at its best, as you suggested earlier, when we're expanding rights and not shrinking rights. But in this moment, it seems that he has, my read, given up or become less concerned about the legitimacy the integrity of this court. You say nothing of the fact he's done nothing to get Thomas or Alito to recuse themselves. He's done nothing about all the gifts and all the trips, et cetera, et cetera. When we come forward, I want to ask you that question direct and forthright, and that is whether or not we have a Supreme Court with a Chief Justice that doesn't just care about it, doesn't seem to care about the legitimacy of the court. You call it values. I take your point, wouldn't disagree with that, but I'm sensing that there's nobody in charge who cares about the way they are out of step. That's what I'm pushing toward. They're completely out of step. They're completely out of touch. They seem not to care about the legitimacy of that particular branch of government, and that is a major concern for me. We'll get Professor Hassan's take on that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month. If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Happy anniversary, KBLA!
KBLA Talk 1580 is now celebrating 3 years of amplifying our voice and uplifting our community. We deeply appreciate your support of this radio station and will always do our level best to earn your support. Here's to many more years of loving and serving our community. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black.
I know it's gonna happen without you.
Getting connected has never been easier. Get free Wi-Fi at all LA County library locations, inside the library and outside in the parking lots. Visit your local library and get connected today.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
My mom has taken up going to the park to practice yoga.
My dad's going to a club, but not a book club, a salsa club.
Finding new hobbies comes with age.
My mom has started getting lost and not knowing where she's going.
Becoming lost or disoriented doesn't. Confusion with time or place may be a sign of Alzheimer's. An early diagnosis can help improve the quality of life for your loved one. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
More of UCLA Professor Rick Hassan, his UCLA law professor, I should say. His new book is called A Real Right to Vote, How a Constitutional Amendment Can Safeguard American Democracy. Let me go right to that in a moment. But your thoughts on the issue that I raised a moment ago, Professor Hassan, that is whether or not John Roberts truly cares about the legitimacy, the integrity of the court. I just listed 4 or 5 reasons that one could argue that suggest he does not. No sanctions for Alito or Thomas, no pressure to make them recuse themselves, no rule code of conduct when everybody's calling for it inside the court, his decisions, his rulings, he's writing some of these decisions, of course, that speak to the contraction of rights, not the expansion of rights. Does John Roberts care about the legitimacy of his own court?
something seems to have changed in the last few years, because if you'd have asked me this question 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I would say certainly does, and you pointed to the Obamacare rulings, but something seems to have changed. You may remember that the court did issue a very weak code of conduct that is self-enforced by each justice, and this was supposed to solve the problem. But there's been no talk of, no condemnation from Roberts of anything that Alito or Thomas has done. And something I noticed, there were 3 cases at the court this term that touched on what Donald Trump is alleged to have done in the 2020 election, trying to subvert our democracy. And in all 3 of those cases, that's the Colorado case, the immunity case, and also one involving some January 6th participants, a case called Fisher, John Roberts had the opportunity to condemn the actions and of those who try to subvert our democracy and to use violence to try to change the outcome. And he passed on that opportunity. He gave very little factual background, in contrast to Justices Sotomayor and Justice Jackson, who both talked about, in their separate opinions, their dissenting and concurring opinions, their disgust and their fear for our democracy. This is a place where John Roberts could have led, without criticizing his colleagues, could have led in favor of democracy. And he knows how to do it. He's written about the benefits of democracy in a case involving a very large campaign contributor. That got him singing the praises of democracy, but not this one. So I do fear that something has changed.
When we come forward in our remaining moments with Professor Hassan, we'll go right again to the book, A Real Right to Vote, How a Constitutional Amendment Can Safeguard American Democracy. We'll talk about that amendment in our remaining moments here on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC. Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Got a few minutes left here, Professor Hassan. Unpack that subtitle for me.
How a constitutional amendment can safeguard American democracy. Well, go back to the 15th Amendment, which gave black Americans the right to vote. It didn't really do that. It said that if you're going to hold an election, you can't discriminate on the basis of race. Same with the 19th Amendment. It didn't really give women the right to vote. It just said if you're going to hold an election, you can't discriminate on the basis of gender. And we know that even after these amendments passed, there was still discrimination. In 1903, the Supreme Court said, despite the 15th Amendment, there was nothing it could do to prevent Alabama from barring black Americans from being registered to vote. It took the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It took political action. It took amendment after amendment. And what we need now is an affirmative right to vote in the Constitution. That's what's not there. There's nothing that says you have the right to vote for president. If you are an adult, you're a citizen, you're a resident of this country, you have the right to vote for Senate. If we had a right like that, we'd have so many fewer fights over the rules for our elections, and we'd have much more enfranchisement. We need a political movement, just like we saw after the Supreme Court rejected women's rights to vote in 1875. It took until 1920 to get that 19th Amendment in the Constitution. And so we need a new political movement. We can't expect that the courts are going to save us or someone else is going to save us. Our democracy requires us to do our own work to get that protection going forward.
That is a lot easier said than done, is it not? What would the process be?
So a constitutional amendment requires a vote of a supermajority of Congress, so 2/3 of each House of Congress, and 3/4 of the states. How's that going to happen? Well, again, go back to what happened after 1875 when the Supreme Court said women don't have equal rights to vote. There was a movement state by state to change state constitutions, and a popular movement was born to push women's enfranchisement. And we need a similar kind of civil rights movement geared around voting rights around a specific program, change state constitutions to strengthen voting rights, and push state representatives that are going to Congress to support a right to vote. And, if we didn't have the kind of gridlock that we have now, I think most Americans would support the idea that Americans each have the right to vote for president. And most people are shocked when they find out that that's not even in the Constitution today.
Yep. And that's the rub for me, that we find ourselves in a moment of such dysfunction and such polarization that I can't imagine in this moment, at least, how that movement, to use your word, takes flight.
Yeah, well, it's going to be it took over 4 decades last time. The civil rights movement took over a century. So you've got to think big, and you can't expect it's going to be instant. But there's a moment. The political parties are changing. The Republican Party is appealing more to working class voters. There may be a moment where it's going to be in the political incentive of both parties to make it easier for people to vote, and that's the moment we'll have to grab.
Yeah. From your mouth to God's ears, as they say, to God's ears. His book is called A Real Right to Vote: How a Constitutional Amendment Can Safeguard American Democracy. And I've been honored to have had him on this program. What's today's date? Today is the 9th. You have an event on the 10th that I should mention for those in the Southern California area?
Yes, that's right. We are doing an event at the UCLA Hammer Museum, doing a review of the Supreme Court's term across a whole bunch of different cases. And
that is Wednesday, July 10th at 7:30 p.m. It's called Under the Gavel, the U.S. Supreme Court's most recent term in review. It's brought to us by the Safeguarding Democracy Project. Again, at the Hammer Museum, that is in West L.A. If you're in Southern California, that's tomorrow, July the 10th, 7:30 p.m. Once again, it's called Under the Gavel, the U.S. Supreme Court's most recent term in review. If you happen to be, we're syndicated, of course, but if you're in Southern California, there is the update on that event tomorrow night that you can check out for yourself. Professor Hassan, congrats on the text. Good to have you on, sir. All the best to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good to have you on. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. President Biden is getting support from the Congress and committed, with one calling talk of removing him from the ticket reduction.